On the heels of executing almost a picture-perfect rebuild, the Baltimore Orioles have made the playoffs each of the last 2 seasons, winning the AL East in 2023 and making it as a wildcard team last year. Mike Elias and this Orioles front office pulled this organization from the cellar of the AL East and turned them into a playoff contender in just a few short years. Unfortunately, it hasn't yet resulted in playoff success for the O's, losing in their first round of the playoffs both of the past 2 seasons. They lost a big fish from their roster in Corbin Burnes to the Arizona Diamondbacks this offseason, but did fill it up with a decent offseason of their own, acquiring a couple position players and pitchers to fill the void. Can the Orioles make a World Series run in 2025? If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'll be putting out the rest of these by opening day. Let's get into a 2025 Baltimore Orioles breakdown. We'll start with some team ranks here, and these are going to be completely objective. My rankings formula are going to be in the description of this video. And although they won a lot of games last season, they didn't necessarily have the greatest units. The lineup and rotation were both really solid for them last year. The defense a bit below league average, and the bullpen right around it. They are getting back one of their best relievers this season though, so I would expect that number to jump up in 2025. Baltimore still has a really solid farm system, even though a lot of their guys have graduated to the major leagues. One area that they're really good in is their hitting development, still 7th in all of baseball with their minor league hitting ranks. Their pitching is a step behind though. Their minor league pitchers come in at 28th on this ranking. The manager of the squad is Brandon Hyde. He's been here for 7 seasons. A bit up and down in terms of how the Orioles fan base feels about him. A lot of people on the fire high train, a lot of people on the keep high train. I think as a guy who watches a lot of Orioles games, I'm pretty firmly on the keep high train. Didn't get a lot of opportunities to make great bullpen decisions last year, and I think that really impacted how he was seen as a manager. And then the architect of this entire thing, Mike Elias, his 7th season here as well. Just under 500 overall, but he really brought a bad roster into a playoff contender. Elias has done an incredible job in the draft, definitely has a type in terms of these position players that he's drafting. Made the playoffs the past 2 seasons, and we'll go into a 2024 season where they were 91 and 71, 2nd in the American League East behind the Yankees and 3rd in the American League. Their payroll in 2024, only $103 million. This year jumped up a pretty significant amount to $161 million. Some free agents brought in this offseason, some guys in arbitration that are going to be making a bit more money. And the PECOTA projection system has them winning the AL East at 88 and 75, having the 2nd best record in the American League just behind the Texas Rangers. They give them a 73.6% chance to make the playoffs this year, and I totally agree with that. I think the Orioles should be seen as the favorite in this division just because of how good the lineup is. In terms of draft capital, Elias is definitely going to have a bit to work with this year. 15, 75, and 87 in the top 100. In terms of top contracts, Tyler O'Neill just brought in this offseason making $16.5 million. Zach Eflin traded over from Tampa Bay at the deadline last year. He's making $16.2 million. And then Charlie Morton, 1-year deal for him, $15 million this offseason. So the Orioles are really showing a willingness to spend money to become a contender with this new ownership group. They made the playoffs last year. I don't have park factor listed here because Baltimore is bringing in the left field. So Mount Baltimore is going to be gone in 2025. Park factor should change a decent amount. Last season, it was a heavy pitcher's park because of how far that left field fence was back. In terms of organization success in 2024, AAA Norfolk Tides, known for being a really solid AAA team, last year was not as good. Bowie in AA, 62 and 75. The Aberdeen Ironbirds, when we get to the prospect section, there are a lot of prospects on that roster. Last year, they were a bit over 500, and the Shorebirds in A-ball, 53 and 78 last season. We'll go into season storylines, and as someone who watches almost every Orioles game throughout the season, I think I'm a bit closer to this situation than a lot of other teams I've done so far. I think pitching is definitely the biggest storyline for this team. They lost Corbin Burnes in free agency. They brought in a couple of guys in Tomoyuki Sugano and Charlie Morton. A full season of Zach Eflin. Is that going to be enough from their rotation to really propel a solid lineup and a good bullpen into World Series contention this year? I guess we'll have to see. Youth contribution is another thing, really been a theme in Baltimore the past couple of years. Jackson Holliday came up last season, really struggled at the major league level, super high strikeout rates. Coby Mayo the same way, another really big prospect, not currently listed on the roster, but we'll go over him in the prospect section. Guys like Jordan Westburg and Colton Cowser really had good years for the Orioles last year though. Can guys like Holliday, maybe Samuel Basallo, Coby Mayo come up and be contributors to this team? And then health and bounce backs. Felix Bautista finally back from an injury this year. Adley Rutschman had a really down season, especially in the second half. Couple other guys I think can bounce back and have better years in 2025. So overall health and a couple bounce backs from really important players I think are going to be a make or break area for this season. I think it's going to be a bit easier to start with the subtractions for this team, so we'll go into that right away. Corbin Burnes, brought in from Milwaukee for Joey Ortiz and DL Hall, a draft pick as well in that trade in 2023, pitched last season with Baltimore and was incredible. 3.7 WAR. He's gone on a big free agent deal to Arizona. Anthony Santander, a big power bat in this lineup, over to the division rival Toronto Blue Jays after the Orioles apparently wouldn't offer him enough money. Jacob Webb over to Texas after a good season last year. Danny Coulomb also over to Minnesota. James McCann, a backup catcher for a couple years here. He's in Atlanta on a one-year deal. And that'll bring us into the addition. So Tyler O'Neill, a really big one for Baltimore. I think a really solid outfielder, was great last season. 3 years, $49.5 million. Does have an opt-out after this year, though. Gary Sanchez here to be a backup catcher. 1 year, $8.5 million. Tomoyuki Sugano and Charlie Morton, two starters, two guys, $28 million combined between the both of them. Morton, a guy with a ton of Major League experience. Sugano, a guy with no Major League experience, coming over from Japan. Ramon Laureano here on a 1 year, $4 million deal to shore up that bench. Andrew Kittredge, currently injured, unfortunately, but here to be a reliever and give some innings out of that bullpen. And then Dylan Carlson here on a major league deal, not currently listed on the roster, but 1 year, $975,000 for him. Before I go into specifics here, I'll explain weighted runs created plus really quick. That'll be the first number you see for every player. It's just an overall measure of offensive productivity. Everything above or below that is going to be the percentage better or worse that you were than league average as an offensive player last season. So for example, Gunnar Henderson projected to be 48% better than league average in 2025. And we'll just go right into it. He's projected 32 homers this year, 17 steals, a bit of a step back, but the projections are pretty conservative on a lot of these guys. He is going to miss some time at the start of the year. So 6.7 WAR, I think, is a pretty good spot for him. Adley Rutschman, they expect to take a big jump up after a really tough second half and a really tough 2024 season. Both of those two guys are going to be projected top 10 at their position in WAR next year. Cedric Mullins projected a better season in 2024, 17 homers and 28 steals, just under 3 WAR. The two guys I mentioned in Westburg and Cowser both had really good years. Cowser finishing runner-up as Rookie of the Year. I can't believe he didn't win it, but we can talk about that in a later video. Projected 3.7 and 3.1 WAR for them individually. Tyler O'Neill projected to be the 6th hitter in this lineup, although I would expect him to move up as we get closer. 24 homers, 6 stolen bases on the projections, 2.4 WAR. Ryan O'Hearn, a really solid lefty bat, crushes right-handed pitching, 20% better than league average and 1.4 WAR. Ryan Mountcastle, another part of this DH first base platoon that they've been running out the past couple years with O'Hearn, projected 11% better than league average, 19 homers, just under 1.5 WAR. And then the biggest X factor on this team, Jackson Holliday, was really bad last year in the majors, struck out way too much, but they're projecting a really solid season for him, 2.4 WAR, 10% better than league average. On the bench here, Gary Sanchez, Ramon Urias, Heston Kjerstad, and Ramon Laureano. Urias more of a primary third baseman. Kjerstad and Laureano can both play outfield. Kjerstad potentially at first base this year, although they do have a pretty solid first base platoon. Sanchez is going to be more of an offensive first catcher. So Grayson Rodriguez is going to start the season on the injured list for the Baltimore Orioles, a former top pitching prospect. He will contribute at some point this season though, so I'll go over those guys really quickly first. Grayson Rodriguez, Trevor Rogers, and Chase McDermott, all currently injured to start this season. I think we will see innings from a lot of them, hopefully a lot for Grayson Rodriguez, but we'll go into Zach Eflin, the projected one as it stands in this rotation. Came over from Tampa in a trade last year and was really solid, started a playoff game here, 3.83 ERA on the projections, just under 3 WAR. Charlie Morton here, he's been in the league forever, 41 years old, a lot of playoff experience, 4.29 ERA. Dean Kramer, very similar, 4.21 ERA on the projections, a guy who's been with Baltimore for a while. And then Tomoyuki Sugano, don't have a lot of data on him, but the Japanese statistics are out of this world. Really old though, 35 years old for a guy just making his major league debut. And then Cade Povich, we'll go over him in the prospect section of this video, although he did give some innings for Baltimore last year. Welcome back, Felix Bautista, the King Felix of my generation. 2.66 ERA, just under 36% on the strikeout rate projected. One of the best closers in the game, and he's projected to be that. Seranthony Dominguez, brought over from Philadelphia last season. He might get some save opportunities to start the season. Not 100% certain if Felix is going to be on the opening day roster because of the injury. Yennier Cano, former All-Star, been really solid here for Baltimore, came over from Minnesota. And then a trio of lefties here, Aiken, Soto, and CNL Perez. Aiken was incredible last year. I would expect him to definitely get some high leverage opportunities. Soto came over at the deadline last year. CNL Perez has been here for a while, just throwing in that bullpen. And then Brian Baker projected to take a big step forward this year. And Albert Suarez here to give you some innings, maybe start some games in the bullpen. He was so valuable to this team last season. Before I get started on these breakdowns, I'll go over some information really quickly on the screen. All of the numbers on the OFF, BSR, DEF are just going to be run values from Baseball Savant. They'll be in terms of percentile compared to the league. On the Savant cards are going to be a lot of plate discipline stuff, the whiff rate, K rate, etc. A lot of hard hit metrics, and then some expected stats on those cards. And then on the player card will be WAR per 162, some counting numbers, weighted runs created plus, and WOBA stands for weighted on base average. Think about it as on base percentage, but it's weighed differently, meaning a home run is weighted more than a triple, weighted more than a double, etc. Just a better way of measuring how you get on base. League average for those two numbers are 100 and 310. We'll get it started here with one of my favorite players in the game, in Adley Rutschman, 27 years old, 5.2 WAR per 162 since he's been up, so he's been super valuable. Last year was such a weird year for Adley. The plate discipline stuff was still there for him. He just really wasn't hitting the ball hard. A second half that was really dreadful for him. All of the swing rates went way down. He was looking at way too many pitches, just didn't really have the confidence to pull the trigger. Even in a down year for Adley, 4% better than league average and 19 homers, really solid in all the plate discipline areas and a good catcher, although not one of the better defensive catchers in the game. The past 2 years for Adley, really good, 809 and 807 OPS. He was by far one of the better catchers in baseball. Last year, we'll go over some of the stats here. A 585 OPS post All-Star, 780 in the first half. He didn't strike out as much as he did in the first half, but he didn't hit the ball really at all. A 282 on base percentage, a 303 slug for him in that second half. The hard hit numbers went way down for him, although the plate discipline numbers were pretty similar. He does look good in spring training, and I think he can get back to the Adley that we've seen in the past. Really didn't hit at all from the left side last year, a 631 OPS against right-handed pitching. For the Orioles to really be a true contender, we need to see the Adley that we saw in 2023 and 2022. So Gary Sanchez, right on my alley, played for my team, the Brewers, last year, and now I get to watch him in Baltimore. A decent hitter, not going to do a lot for you on the defensive side, about league average in caught stealing and pop time, but not great in the block and framing areas. Just about league average offensively, 96 weighted runs created plus last year, definitely better against lefties. Big time hitting prospect with the Yankees coming up, was actually really solid in 2023, a 780 OPS. Always a guy who's going to hit the ball hard, but does have some swing and miss in his game. Historically very good against left-handed pitching, so you can throw him out there a lot against lefty starters. Gary Sanchez and Adley Rutschman, an interesting catching group here in Baltimore. You need Adley to go back to the Adley that we've seen before for this to be a real good group. Ryan Mountcastle here at first base, a guy who's been with the Orioles for a long time, was pretty good offensively last year, 8% better than league average. Not a big time power guy at first base, more of a gap to gap power player, but a real good defender at the position, and he got really unlucky, I think, last season with a lot of the batted ball luck. His expected WOBA is much higher than the WOBA he got last year. I think there's a much better hitter in Ryan Mountcastle that we just haven't seen yet in terms of results, but a guy that crushes left-handed pitching, about a league average base runner, and really solid range at first base. Real good season for him in 2023, 780 OPS, 18 homers. We saw a lot of the same stuff from him in terms of the metrics, so I would expect Ryan Mountcastle to get closer to that in 2025. A guy that's going to crush left-handed pitching, be out there a lot against righties as well, and a dude who made a big step forward in terms of the defense, 79th percentile in range last year compared to 41st in 2023. A really solid first baseman in Ryan Mountcastle. I've been excited to talk about this one. As a guy who ordered his jersey before he even got called up, I was a bit disappointed to see what he did last year. 63 weighted runs created plus. The strikeout rate was just enormous. 33% of the time he struck out last season. Didn't walk as much. A couple numbers I do really like from him though. The speed is crazy. He's a solid defender at second base. Came up as a shortstop in the system and played there a lot. If Gunnar is hurt to start the season and misses an extended period of time, I could see Holliday going over to short and playing a lot to start the year. I do really like the hard hit rate for him. He was hitting the ball really hard when he made contact with it. The problem is he just wasn't doing that very often. Really a non-factor against lefties at the plate last year as well. Holliday was the number 1 pick in the 2022 draft and was the number 1 prospect in minor league baseball last season. A guy that crushed his way through minor league baseball, a 908 OPS last year in 73 games in AAA. In 2023, a lot of the same, posting OPSs of over 900 in 2 levels. In the minor leagues, 201 walks, 207 strikeouts for Holliday. So he's shown incredible plate discipline. He just got up to the majors. I don't know if he was pressing too much, if he was really not ready for the moment, but he just wasn't the player that we saw in the minor leagues. I'm expecting Jackson Holliday to have a really solid season in 2025, although it might not be the numbers that we've seen from him throughout the minor leagues. Jordan Westburg, a guy that had been on the prospect radar for a long time here in Baltimore, came up in 2023 for a bit and got a long run last season and was really good at the major league level. 25% better than league average, 18 homers. The expected stats loved him. He actually underperformed a decent amount of those, so I think we can expect a better season out of Jordan Westburg this year. Not a great defender at third base, but a really solid base runner and just does so many good things offensively. A guy that doesn't have great plate discipline metrics, but doesn't strike out a ton. You would like to see that walk rate go up a bit. 228 plate appearances in 2023 for Jordan Westburg, a 715 OPS last year, the 793 in 447. Was dealing with some injuries down the stretch, only 78 at-bats post All-Star break, a 693 OPS there for him, so he had a really solid first half. Didn't play the entire month of August and just 27 plate appearances in September, a 453 OPS that month. Big-time minor league hitter in Westburg, though. 2023, 67 games, a 939 OPS. In 2022, an 851 over 3 levels. A guy who's just done it at every step of the way and a real solid hitter at third base in Jordan Westburg. One of the premier players in the game of baseball and maybe the second best shortstop in the league just behind Bobby Witt. Gunnar Henderson had an incredible year last year. 37 homers, 21 steals, 159 games, 55% better than league average offensively. It sounds like he's going to miss a bit of the start of the season due to an injury, but he will be back, I think, for most of the season. 96th percentile in offensive run value, 94th in base running. Not great in defensive run value, but the outs above average isn't bad, and he doesn't have a bad arm, so I don't think that's something to worry about. Really just good in every area last year. All the expected stats super far up there. The bat speed is incredible, so you can see why he's getting those hard hit numbers. He'll whiff and strike out at about a league average rate, but that's really the only thing that he doesn't do well. Has had run for 3 years in the majors, 132 plate appearances in 22, 622 in 23, and then a full season last year. Got better and better every single step of the way. Cut down on the strikeouts a lot last year. Got much better against left-handed pitching last season as well, an 829 OPS against lefties. Second half was a bit of a step back for him, a 799 OPS, although that's still really solid. A month of August that was pretty tough for him, a 708 OPS, but pre-All-Star he was a 957 OPS guy, 28 home runs. I'm hoping Gunnar Henderson can make a full recovery from his injury and get back as soon as possible because I love watching Gunnar Henderson play the game of baseball. Baltimore's biggest offseason acquisition in 2024, Tyler O'Neill, 2.5 WAR per 162, 31% better than league average offensively and 31 homers to go along with that. A guy that has had a lot of success as a hitter in the majors, just really hasn't been able to stay on the field. The hard hit rates and barrel rates are so far up there. Really solid bat speed for him. If you saw him in person, you would be able to see why. The dude is jacked. Never been great in the strikeout area. He does strike out well above league average, but he will walk a decent amount, which is kind of nice. It shows that there's a lot of plate discipline there. He just whiffs at a lot of pitches. Not the greatest defender on the planet, but does have a really solid arm, and I think with that shortened left field in Baltimore, it's going to be a plus for him. A really solid bounce back season in 2024 for O'Neill after 2 real injury-riddled years in 23 and 22 where he was just never able to get it going offensively. His last close to full season in 2021, he was in the upper 10th percentile of almost every single hard hit stat. He's a guy that's gonna hit the ball hard and he's gonna swing and miss a lot. Sometimes can be a real frustrating at bat to watch because you don't know if it's gonna be a home run or a strikeout, but a real 3 true outcomes guy he's kind of turned himself into. Wasn't great on the walk rates in the past, but really got that eye at the plate last year. I think a real solid pickup, and I think he's gonna have a really good season here in Baltimore. Cedric Mullins, the long-term center fielder of this team, had a solid year offensively last year, really good in the base running category, 32 stolen bases. A guy who won't swing and miss very often, that whiff rate is up there in baseball, but he doesn't hit the ball very hard. Specifically last season, took a pretty big step back in a lot of those areas. A solid defender in center field, 4 outs above average as a center fielder last season, and I mentioned a really good base runner, a left-handed hitter who's not going to hit lefties very well. Really settled into being about a league average hitter after a 2021 season where he went 30-30, but the last 3 years, a 710, a 721, and a 721 OPS over those 3 seasons. The homers right around the same, a really good base runner. Took a big step back against left-handed pitching last year, and that really hurt his ability to get at-bats down the stretch against lefties. If the Orioles need to platoon him and bring another guy in to hit left-handed pitching, I think they should be able to do that, but still really solid against righties. He'll be a free agent after this season, but a long-time Oriole and a guy who's contributed a lot here in Cedric Mullins. Colton Cowser, runner-up for AL Rookie of the Year in 2024. Again, think he should have won it personally, but who am I to say? 153 games out of Cowser last year. Really solid offensively. 24 homers, 9 steals, 20% better than league average. Really good defender in the outfield. 91st percentile in defensive run value. The range and arm strength are both really good for him. Did a good job at hitting the ball hard last year. The barrel rate is way up there. The hard hit rate, average exit velocity, all really good. Does have a lot of swing and miss in his game, though. You can see that in the K rates, but a guy that's going to walk a decent amount, so the plate discipline is there. Another one of these top Orioles prospects was all the way up to number 19 in the top 100. Came up from the minors in 2023 and really struggled, a 434 OPS. The strikeout rate's just off the charts for him that year, but did show some solid signs. And last year really put it together, a good season over almost a full 162. Got better as the season went on as well, an 814 OPS in the second half. Didn't hit lefties great last year. I think that's an area that he can improve, but a former 5th overall pick in 2021 out of Sam Houston State. A plus defender and a real solid hitter. If he can hit that ball in the air more often, we're going to see a really good season from Colton Cowser. The designated hitter here, Ryan O'Hearn, taken from the Kansas City Royals scrap heap a couple seasons ago and ended up being one of the better hitters in baseball in a lot of areas the past couple of years. The Orioles have done such a good job at putting O'Hearn in advantageous situations. He crushes right-handed pitching and he has such good plate discipline. All the expected numbers really liked him last year. He's a guy that's going to play mostly against righties, a few at-bats here and there against left-handed pitching, but when he's out on the field against right-handed pitching, one of the better hitters in the game. Came over for a full season the first time in 2023, an 802 OPS after the season before, 145 plate appearances, a 611 OPS. O'Hearn actually took a step forward in a lot of the expected numbers last season. Although he wasn't hitting the ball as hard, the plate discipline was just impeccable from him last year. Will be a free agent after this season, but one of the best margin pickups from any team in baseball over the past couple of years. Ryan O'Hearn has really turned himself into a great hitter and can platoon with Mountcastle as a first baseman against right-handed pitching. A really good pickup from Mike Elias and co in that front office. On the bench here, 3 really solid hitters actually for Baltimore. Ramon Urias had a really good year in 2024 after not doing so hot in 2023. A guy who's going to play great defense at third base most of the time. 11 homers last year, 15% better than league average. 30 years old, a guy that's been around for a while in this rebuild. Heston Kjerstad, currently the number 2 prospect in the Orioles organization, has been a well above average hitter since he's been up in the majors. They've just really had trouble finding him at bats. Mostly an outfielder. I could see him getting some run at first base this season. A lot of pop in that bat out of Kjerstad and some really good plate discipline numbers as well. A 351 on base last season for Kjerstad. Not the best defender in the world, but can really hit. And then Ramon Laureano kind of turned his career around after a real struggle for a couple seasons there. Over in Atlanta last season, 8% better than league average, 11 homers and 8 steals, 98 games. A really solid center field defender. I think this is going to be the platoon guy with Cedric Mullins against left-handed pitching. I like this bench a lot in Baltimore, and this lineup is just so good. We'll get into the pitching section of this video, and I'll go over some numbers real quick here again. On the right, it's just going to be run values again. Pitching run value, fastball run value, breaking run value, off-speed run value. The middle will be your Savant card, a lot of the same numbers. On the bottom left is going to be your pitches, usages, and miles per hour. FIP on the player card stands for fielding independent pitching. We're going to see that as a projector of ERA over a long period. So for example, we would expect Grayson Rodriguez's ERA to go down because his FIP was lower than his ERA. Stuff Plus and Location Plus, 2 models built by Eno Saris on Fangraphs. A measure of how good a pitcher's stuff is and how good they are at locating their pitches. 100 for that is league average, the same as weighted runs created plus. And we'll go right into Grayson Rodriguez, currently going to be injured starting the season on the injured list for Baltimore, 25 years old, the former #1 overall prospect in the system. Came up in 2023 and kind of got rocked, but last year, a really solid year out of him, a 3.86 ERA. The whiff rates and K rates are really good, a big-time strikeout pitcher. The off-speed pitches were great for him, 91st percentile in run value. A guy with super good extension, meaning that he's going to release that ball closer to the plate than 97% of pitchers, so that perceived velocity is going to go up. Had a sweeper in 2023, cut it out completely, and just went four-seam change, slider, and curve, and that really helped him succeed. Got better in almost every metric last season on Baseball Savant, a much better season from Gray Rod, a former first-round pick, again, the #1 prospect in their system at a time. I'm really excited for Grayson Rodriguez, and hopefully he can come back completely healthy and give a full season. Zach Eflin, the 2 starter in this rotation if Rodriguez would be here, but gonna start on opening day for Baltimore, brought over from Tampa at the trade deadline last season. Really good numbers for him, a 3.59 ERA, 3.81 FIP. Not as much of a big-time strikeout guy as Rodriguez, but really limits walks, gets a lot of chases on his pitches, and induces some pretty soft contact. His fastball is really good, even though the velo is down there. The sinker and cutter, both a big part of his repertoire. With Baltimore last season, after he came over in the trade, a 2.60 ERA in 9 starts, 47 strikeouts, and 11 walks for him, so he was really good. Started throwing his cutter more last year when he came over to Baltimore, and that was a really good pitch for him. I'm really excited for the season that Zach Eflin could have, only 30 years old, currently the #1 starter for the Baltimore Orioles. Charlie Morton still kicking, 41 years old. He's been around forever in the majors, formerly of the Atlanta Braves. Decent stats last year at 4.19 ERA. The stuff was really good for him, the location not as much, but that's around his career norm. Pitching is expensive, and as you can see, not a super good season for him, but 1 year $15 million deal. Big time curveball for him. 42% of the time he's going to throw that pitch. Just about league average in a bunch of the metrics, but he does get a lot of ground balls. Gave up more barrels last year, which led to more home runs. 2023, a great year for Charlie Morton. 3.64 ERA over 163 innings. Never really been a big time fastball guy, but that breaking pitch, 99th percentile in run value in 2023. I mentioned he's been around a lot. He's also pitched in the playoffs a lot. 79 career innings in the playoffs and been a really solid pitcher. I think Baltimore really wanted to go out and get a veteran in this rotation. They brought in a guy that has a lot of experience in the majors. Charlie Morton, 41 years old, still going to be the #2 starter to open the year in Baltimore. Dean Kramer, been around Baltimore for a long time. A solid year from him last year, just about league average in both stuff and location. 129.2 innings, 4.10 ERA. Did overperform a few of his expected numbers. He's not much of a high ceiling guy, but he can definitely give you some floor in the fact that he'll give you a lot of innings. Did deal with a couple injuries last year, so he wasn't out there for the full season. Doesn't give up a ton of hard contact. That average exit velocity and hard hit rate are both pretty high in terms of percentiles, but just doesn't get a ton of strikeouts, a bit below league average in that area, and he really struggled with walks last year, 9.2 percentile. Gave up some barrels, even though that average exit velocity and hard hit rate aren't very high. He still did give up some homers last year, and that led to the inflated ERA. In the past, the fastball had been the bread and butter pitch for Kramer, but last year it took a huge step back, going all the way from 90th in run value percentile to 28th. This season, the off-speed and the breaking run value really did take a step forward though, so he developed those secondary pitches, but the fastball got hit pretty bad. Had a really solid 2022 season for Baltimore, a 3.23 ERA over 22 games, 21 starts, 125 innings that year. 2023, a bit of a step back, a 4.12 ERA. The metrics weren't as nice to him, but a lot of the same stuff, just was giving up too much hard contact that year. And we saw a lot of that this year. The fastball just really got hit last year, and that's where Kramer needs to be a bit better if he wants to be a solid #3 in this rotation. So this is a different one. Tomoyuki Sugano, a Japanese pitcher brought over from NPB last year. He was insane over in Japan last year. 1.67 ERA, a 2.16 FIP. A guy that doesn't get many strikeouts really at all. 18.3% on the K rate, 2.6% though on the walk rate. We don't have metrics on him that I can find on Baseball Savant, but we do have one start at a StatCast park, so we can see a bit of a look into what he does in terms of his pitch usage. A lot of splitter, cutter, four-seam, and curveball for him. Doesn't throw the sinker and sweeper as much, but the splitter, a prominent Japanese pitch, one that he throws very well. A guy who's been pitching for a long time, was really solid in the World Baseball Classic just a couple years ago. The splitter and curveball, I think, are going to be two really good pitches for him this year. The projections don't really love him. A 35-year-old pitcher projected a 4.66 ERA. So far in spring training, for whatever it's worth, 10.1 innings, hasn't given up a run yet, 28.9% on the strikeout rate, so I think hitters are just getting used to that splitter. Tomoyuki Sugano over here on a one-year deal from Japan, 35 years old, to be a four-starter here for Baltimore, and that'll get us into the bullpen. Welcome back, Felix Bautista. 46.4% strikeout rate in 2023. Yes, almost half the batters he faced in 2023, he struck out. A guy that's an absolute flamethrower. He will walk a guy here and there, 11% on the walk rate, but the stuff is incredible. 37% better than league average, 1.48 ERA, a 1.88 FIP. He does everything well. Missed all of last year with an injury. 100th percentile in whiff rate and K rate. 100th percentile in all of the expected stats and the fastball velo. An absolute mountain of a human being. 6'8", 285, just 29 years old. Has came back in spring training. The velo's down a little bit, which is kind of scary for him. Not 100% certain if he'll be starting the season healthy and ready on the Major League roster, but he will be your closer when he's back. Seranthony Dominguez brought over at the deadline last season, a 4.45 ERA overall, a 4.01 FIP, 118 on the stuff plus. The location, again, another issue for him. Got a bit better when he came to Baltimore last year, a 3.97 ERA in those appearances for Baltimore. Really solid at limiting hard contact. The average exit velocity is down there, but another guy that caught too many barrels, gave up too many home runs last year. And then one of my favorite guys in the game, Yennier Cano, 31 years old, came over from Minnesota as a throw-in in a trade and absolutely blew up onto the scene. Ended up being an all-star in 2023, and last year was really solid as well, although the FIP was a bit inflated for him. The ERA was higher than it was in 2023. Really solid with the stuff. The location is really good for him. Not a huge strikeout guy, but one that doesn't give up very many barrels, gets a lot of balls on the ground, 99th percentile in ground ball rate. A great fastball for him. I mentioned the 2023 season, a 2.11 ERA and 72.2 innings, so he's been here doing it for a couple of years for Baltimore now. Hoping that Felix Bautista can be back to full health, because with these three guys, I really like the back of this bullpen. The three lefties here at the top, we'll go into Keegan Aiken. He was absolutely nails for Baltimore last year down the stretch. 78.2 innings, a 3.32 ERA, a 2.99 FIP, 31% on the strikeout rate. Really just not a good season for him in 2023, a 6.85 ERA in 23 innings. Last year just really developed his pitches. His fastball and breaking pitches were both super good. Gregory Soto, the second lefty out of this crew, was acquired from the Phillies at the trade deadline last year for Austin Hayes. Came over, did some things well, but just really struggled with the ERA, a 5.09 in Baltimore, 17.2 innings. More of a high upside guy than anything, gets a lot of strikeouts and throws a really hard fastball. And then Cionel Perez, acquired a couple years ago from Cincinnati in 2022, a 1.40 ERA, 57.2 innings. Last year didn't get as many good results, but a lot of stats that are solid for him. Really good in the ground ball rate, didn't give up much hard contact at all. The barrel rate, hard hit rates are way down there. Not gonna strike out a lot of guys, and really had an issue with the walks. That's why the ERA was so high for him last year, but I think another really solid lefty. I would expect him to have a much better season in 2025. Brian Baker kind of did the reverse Aiken in 2024, a 5.01 ERA and 23.1 innings after a 3.60 in 2023, 3.49 the season before that. It was really just allowing barrels for him that got to him. That barrel rate went way down, gave up way too many home runs, and a really small sample for him as well, so I wouldn't count him out as being a successful pitcher. And then where would this Orioles team have been in 2024 without Albert Suarez out there for him, man? He was so solid for this team. A guy that had been around forever, never really had success in the majors, and then last season a 3.70 ERA in 32 games, 24 starts, all the metrics about league average, but just so impressive in terms of innings and quality innings at that. Albert Suarez, I would definitely expect to start some games here for this team. I do really like this bullpen though. I think guys like Soto and Perez could have better seasons in 2025. I think it's something to look forward to. That'll bring us into the top prospect section of this video, and we'll get started here with Samuel Basallo. He has light tower power, a 70 power grade, really solid behind the plate in terms of his arm, a 70 arm. Got up to AAA last year after coming along really quickly in the system, 20 years old. Overall, 22% better than league average offensively, but not great numbers in AAA, a really small sample there for him. The only issue with Basallo is the fact that he's going to swing and miss a lot. He doesn't have the best plate discipline, but man, he has an absolutely electric profile. That power is just incredible. A former big-time international signing for this Mike Elias crew. Long-term seen as an impact, middle-of-the-order major league bat. I wouldn't expect him to push Adley off of catcher. I think Basallo is going to settle in at first base or DH long term, but an incredible hitter in Samuel Basallo. Got to cut down the strikeout rates a bit, but he hits the ball super hard. Coby Mayo here, third baseman, got up to the majors last year, number 29 in the top 100. Those are his minor league stats on the screen, 45% better than league average, 25 homers. Another guy with outrageous power, a 70 on the power tool. He does have a bit of a better hit tool, I think, than Samuel Basallo. Again, a guy with a really solid arm, not a plus defender at third base though. Got up to the majors as I mentioned last year, not a great sample for him though, 4 for 46 with 22 strikeouts in the major leagues. Just I don't think was really ready for it, although his minor league numbers were really good. But we kind of have seen that with a lot of Baltimore's prospects in the past, guys like Cowser, Jackson Holliday, really struggled right away when they come up. I do think Mayo is going to be a really solid player though, just the minor league stats are too good not to be an alright major league player. I think Mayo might slot into first base long term, probably pushing Mountcastle out of the position. Definitely has all-star potential though, and another guy with huge power. And then we got Vance Honeycutt here, a first-round pick from last season out of North Carolina, 21 years old, a 60 on the Baseball America grade, not in the top 100 right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it there. Baltimore was really aggressive with their draft picks last year, bringing a lot of them up to high A. He wasn't very good there in the minors overall, a 40 weighted runs created plus. Some of the tools are really good for him, really good defensively in the outfield. A 55 power tool for him, a 65 run as well. Not a very advanced hit tool, but I think something that he can generate. Great numbers for him at North Carolina. I will mention he's a number 4 prospect in the system. Heston Kjerstad is the number 2, but we already talked about him in the major league section. Just a big question mark for Honeycutt with the hit tool. Struck out 43% of the time in his 13 game debut last year. A really small sample for him, but a really good power grade, a real solid athlete. Hopefully he can continue making enough contact to turn into a real solid hitter. That'll bring us into these infield prospects. We'll get it started with Griff O'Farrell. He was the second day 1 prospect selected by Baltimore last year. Got up to high A last year. Again, they were really aggressive with these guys last season. Definitely a hit tool shortstop, solid in the running category, not a long-term shortstop I don't think, but solid fielding. A 3-year starter at Virginia in college, definitely an above average bat. Will be starting at high A this season. Leandro Arias, their number 18 prospect, another shortstop in this system, had a full season almost at low A last year and got a month of run at high A at the end of the season. No standout tools for Arias, but he has a really solid athletic up the middle profile and can be a big leaguer over time. Aaron Estrada, definitely a guy with an everyday regular ceiling in the majors, a couple real solid tools, the hit, run, field, and arm all at 50. Likely will spend a majority of 2025 at high A. Ethan Anderson, a draft pick from last season, again got up to high A. Not great numbers there last year, but a couple really solid tools. And then Joshua Lozano, definitely the biggest toolsy guy out of this crew, a 60 arm, 55 power. He was in the complex league last year. One of my favorite prospects in baseball, and Enrique Bradfield to start off this outfield, a big time runner. The hit tool is really solid for him too. A longtime player at Vanderbilt and a first round pick, got up to double A last year, the number 6 prospect in this system. Judd Fabian, 24 years old, some really solid numbers in the minors, just strikes out way too much, but real good tools for him. I would expect him to get up to the majors at some point this season, alongside Dylan Beavers. 60 run tool, really solid across the board for him. He had much better numbers overall in the minors, not as bad of strikeout issues. Thomas Sosa, I think think is the biggest riser in this minor league system, 19 years old, up to high A last year. I could definitely see him having a standout season, a couple really good tools in the power and arm, and then Austin Over in a draft pick last year, again up to high A. A 70 grade runner, 60 grade fielder, so very similar to Vance Honeycutt with those tools, just not as advanced of a hitter. That'll bring us to the pitchers and a couple guys here in Povich and McDermott that were up in the major leagues last season. Povich did pitch a lot, 79.2 innings in the majors, but a 5.20 ERA, not great on a lot of the metrics, but I think Povich is a long-term option as a starter. Will start the season in the rotation most likely. Chase McDermott currently injured, but I will think will be making some starts in the majors this year. Has a plus slider and fastball. I think he's going to be a solid pitcher. Michael Ford, an absolute flurry of pitches here for him. The fastball and splitter at 55, and then the slider, changeup, and sweeper, all 50 grade pitches for him. Another guy in high A, just 20 years old. Nestor Herman, sounds like a Yankees love child, 24 years old, in high A last season. Fastball, curveball, and slider all above average. The control also a 55 grade. And then Trey Gibson, another high A guy here. 4 really good graded pitches. The fastball, curveball, cutter, and slider all at or above 55. This high A team might be one of the most loaded teams in all of minor league baseball next season. It is actually crazy. I'll go over a projected 2028 lineup by Baseball America as well. A lot of guys here that you just get so excited about. Rutschman, Mayo, Holliday, Westburg, Henderson, Cowser, Kjerstad all have major league experience out of this group. Only Adley is going to be 30 years old out of that entire squad. Went over all these guys in the prospect section. I think Coby Mayo does stand good at first base long term, a real solid power hitter, and I think he has a first baseman's profile. Jackson Holliday, the former #1 overall prospect, alongside Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson in the system, hoping that he can take a big step forward in the majors this year. Westburg has really performed at every single level that he's been at. I would expect him to continue to do that. Cowser, a real big step forward in 2024. Vance Honeycutt, not 100% certain if we'll be seeing him up here in 2028, would only be 25 years old and really hasn't shown much in the minors yet, but depending on how he plays this season, I think we could see him in 2028. Heston Kjerstad, I love his profile. Honestly, was one of my favorite prospects in this entire system going forward. Just so much power in that bat, and as an outfielder with that sweet lefty swing, I think he can really play in the majors for a long time. Samuel Basallo, they have a DH. I would expect that if Adley's still here. A real advanced hitter for his age in terms of the power, but not as good of a defender, and I think that's where Adley has a bit of a step on Basallo as a player, although I think he can go band for band with almost every prospect in all of the minor leagues in terms of his power tool. Love this projected 2028 lineup. If we get good seasons out of guys like Jackson Holliday and Coby Mayo in the majors this year, you just get so excited about what this future can look like. Didn't talk about Kyle Bradish in this entire video. He's going to miss all of 2024 with Tommy John surgery, but he definitely is a 1 in this rotation. I think the Orioles were really counting on him to be that guy, and unfortunately, he's just not going to be there this season. Grayson Rodriguez, they have as the 2 starter. I think he could even be the 1 starter. We saw a lot out of him last year. Cade Povich, they have developing into a 3. We haven't seen much of him in the majors so far, but some really good minor league stats for Cade Povich. I think he could definitely be there. Dean Kramer, I don't know about him long term as a 4 starter in this rotation. I think this is an area where the O's need to go out and spend some money or make a trade. And then Chase McDermott picking up the back end of this rotation. Could definitely see him developing into a starter, but I think these last 2 spots could definitely use a bit of an overhaul. In terms of the closer, as long as Felix Bautista is throwing, he's going to be one of the best guys in the game. That fastball is just so good. He throws that power splitter as well. So while there are a couple exciting names in here, I am excited to see Bradish come back next season and really contribute to this team. Grayson Rodriguez, I do really like. Povich as well. Definitely a bit of a step back in terms of the talent from the lineup to the rotation. I think Baltimore's got to go out and get a guy here and there in the rotation to really patch this up. That'll bring me into some final thoughts. This is the area where I actually allow myself to be a bit subjective. I might be a bit too close to the situation watching so much Baltimore, but I just love this lineup so much. I think a lot of things went wrong for them last year. Adley didn't have a great year. Jackson came up and didn't really do much at all. Coby, pretty much the same exact thing for him. And they still had a really solid season last year. Yes, they did lose Corbin Burns. I think they can patch that up in the aggregate just a little bit. I don't expect Sugano and Morton to duplicate the productivity that Burns brought to this rotation, but I think they can do it to an extent. And maybe if guys like Povich give you better seasons, if Grayson comes back and is really solid, a full season of Zach Eflin maybe can get close to that rotation in 2024. But the area that I'm the most excited for by far is this bullpen. Getting Felix back is going to be so big for this crew. I think Dominguez and Soto I feel a lot better about in 2025. Some of the metrics just really like their seasons last year, and although the results weren't great, I think they can take steps forward in some areas. Brian Baker I think has a better season in 2025. Aiken was really good last year. If he can continue that, you feel really solid about this bullpen. An AL East that has definitely improved a lot. The Red Sox got a lot better. I think the Rays got better this offseason, and Toronto is going to try to compete as much as they can. The Yankees still being the Yankees. I think compared to this projected win total, I would be right around it, maybe a bit higher than Pacoda is on Baltimore. I just love the lineup, man. I can't get over how good Gunnar is. Hopefully that injury isn't super significant. Adley, I think, takes a step forward. Jackson, Coby, Mayo, a couple of these guys take steps forward that weren't great last year. And I think the Baltimore Orioles win somewhere around 90 games this season. I would currently have them as the favorites in the American League East, although the Yankees are really solid. That's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for listening to this video. This was a really fun one. Love the Orioles, man. This was a breakdown of the 2025 Baltimore Orioles organization.